FPV drones were a breakthrough of their time. Then came fiber optic drones and later ground-based robotic evacuation systems. It seemed there was nothing left to surprise us, but Ukraine has once again achieved the incredible. For the first time, Ukrainian soldiers delivered a combat robot to an occupied shore using a maritime drone. And not just anywhere, but on the Kinburn Spit, one of the most dangerous and heavily controlled sections of the southern front by the Russians. One robot landed another. An assault without people sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie. But this is already a reality that helps save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers during the most dangerous combat missions. How was this operation carried out? Why do the military call it the beginning of a new era of warfare? And what does this mean for the future of Ukraine? Find out in this episode. And before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. A ground robotic complex, or GRC, is a remotely operated machine that replaces a soldier on the battlefield. An unmanned maritime platform is essentially the same unmanned vehicle, just on water. And this time, it played the role of a transport. It delivered the ground robotic complex to the occupied coastline, where it was able to begin its combat mission. To understand why this operation became significant, it's worth recalling what the Kinburn Spit is. Russian troops occupied this sandy spit, located a few kilometers from Ochakiv, in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion. From there, for over a year, they have been shelling the Ochakiv and Kutsurub communities in the Mykolaiv region. Because of the occupation of the spit, the ports in the region remain blocked to this day. Dozens of ships. Any landing on this coastline has always been considered one of the riskiest naval operations. The occupiers have deployed a dense system of radio-electronic reconnaissance and electronic warfare equipment on the spit. That's why a person crossing open water or landing on the shore can be easily detected. That is why, in May 2024, SBU Sea-Baby maritime drones operated against Russian positions here.
Services. A year ago, Vasil Malyuk initiated the very idea of creating unmanned crewless platforms. Sea-Baby drones are specifically designed as destroyers of maritime surface drones. And
in August, special forces from the Main Intelligence Directorate carried out a ground raid, destroying fortifications at the positions, the Kinburn Fortress and the seaport terminal. In all these operations, real people had to risk their lives. But on August 13th, the risk to personnel was minimized because it wasn't soldiers who landed on the occupied coast, but a robot. The operation was reported by the 123rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade, which is responsible for the Mykolaiv direction. It was led by the brigade commander, Colonel Ole Makuha, and its direct organization was ensured by the commander of the 1st Battalion of Unmanned Systems, Major Denis Hipik. The brigade emphasized that this mission was unique not only because of its result, but also due to the method of delivering the ground robotic system to the task location. This is the first known combat mission of this format in the world.
The ground robotic system was delivered to the enemy shore using an unmanned maritime platform, landed on the occupied land of its homeland, and deployed to carry out a combat mission.
Colonel Ole Makuha compared this landing to the Allied operation in Normandy, one of the largest amphibious assaults of World War II. It was the landing on June 6, 1944 that became known as D-Day. It marked the beginning of the opening of the Second Front in Western Europe against Nazi Germany. According to him, this is the first stage of the technological presence of the armed forces of Ukraine on the temporarily occupied territory of Mykolaiv region.
We accomplished this without deploying personnel or infantry. But this led to chaos among the enemy and the presence of fire damage on the Kinburn Peninsula.
The advantage of this method is that such a landing allows for striking enemy positions and conducting sabotage missions without any risk to personnel. And most importantly, it creates a threat for the enemy that electronic surveillance systems do not have time to detect.
This is a new approach to warfare, where the machine takes on the risk instead of the human.
Units specializing in unmanned systems explain that the decisive factor for carrying out such operations is the readiness of the commanders to take responsibility. They are responsible for new approaches. The brigade does not disclose the model of the robot, its specific armament, or the detailed results of the mission because revealing the characteristics of a system that has just completed a combat task would mean giving the enemy clues on how to counter it. The brigade published a video with fragments of the operation on its Facebook page. But what does this actually mean? This operation is not an isolated experiment, but part of broader changes in the conduct of war. For several years now, the Ukrainian army has been actively developing ground robotic systems and expanding the scope of their use. According to Reuters, since the beginning of 2026 alone, such platforms have carried out more than 22,000 assault, logistics, and evacuation missions.
Rotel, Termit, Ardal, Rice, Zimai, Protector, Volya, and other of our ground robotic complexes. In just 3 months, they have already completed more than 22,000 missions at the front. In other words, more than 22,000 lives have been saved. In the most dangerous zones, it was the robot that went instead of the soldier.
The Ministry of Defense notes that they have used the increase in ground drones makes it possible to reduce personnel losses by 30 to 40% in the most dangerous sections of the front in the so-called gray zone. In certain units of the armed forces of Ukraine, specialized companies of ground robotic complexes have already been formed, and by the end of 2026, their number is planned to be increased to 50,000. That is twice as many as last year. Another confirmation of this development was the assault carried out by the Kartia Brigade in December 2024, near Liptsi in the Kharkiv region. At that time, for the first time since the beginning of the full-scale war, Ukrainian soldiers captured an enemy position without the involvement of infantry, only with the help of ground robotic systems and FPV drones. So the landing on the Kinburn Spit became a logical continuation of the development of unmanned technologies. For the command, this opens up operations that were previously either not considered at all or postponed due to the excessively high risk to personnel. For the Russians, this means that even control over the coastline and the sea no longer guarantees protection. An attack can now come from where no one expects it, and without a single Ukrainian soldier within range. At the same time, it's important to look at things soberly. One successful operation is proof of possibility, not a guarantee that this will start happening on a large scale tomorrow. The weather and waves at sea haven't gone anywhere, and maintaining a stable connection with a robot in open water is a much more difficult task than controlling a ground drone on land. But the first step has already been taken, and the brigade openly states that it will continue to develop this direction further. However, the significance of this operation goes far beyond the landing itself. Dmytro Platenchuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, spoke on the telethon about how such actions could affect Russian logistics and the situation in the Sea of Azov.
The Ukrainian forces, due to the fact that maritime logistics was the first to be cut off, accordingly, they were probably forced to resort to such actions because there were no other means of delivery left here. Because what remained was the so-called Crimean Bridge and the so-called land corridor. You just showed in the report what's happening with the corridor, and that's true. And with the bridge, there's complete uncertainty. It's not allowed to drive onto it. So it's like a sacred cow, which means that even in such a crisis, nothing can be brought in over it. Well, that says a lot too about what it actually means. That's why they resorted to such a risky operation. Why they decided that the Sea of Azov was safe for this, I still don't understand. Because in principle, it's public knowledge. It was announced more than 2 years ago that it is within the range of the weapon system, within the weapon system. These past 2 years have changed a lot, and definitely not in favor of the Russians. It was quite a risky decision and basically a legislative outcome. That's why I believe they'll have quite a lot of trouble because of this, since apparently this was their last chance to deliver in sufficient quantities. Because of course you can break through with fuel trucks via the land route. At some point, maybe even by bridge, but the volumes are completely different.
Mr. Dmytro, what is known about these damaged Russian tankers? What condition are they in? Do they pose a threat to navigation? And is there any information about a possible leak of fuel and lubricants from these damaged tankers?
There hasn't been any such information so far. Of course, it's quite difficult to verify this, as the Russians generally conceal the consequences as a matter of principle. Believe me, if something like that had happened, if there had been an oil or petroleum spill and a fire, they would have already reported it through all their media outlets. Ukraine organized an ecocide or something like that, that would be just their style. If such information still hasn't appeared in the information space, it means they simply don't have the corresponding footage. And regarding the routes, there aren't that many routes in the Sea of Azov. It's a shallow sea, the depths are small there, and the routes are quite limited. Therefore, of course, this creates a problem for other vessels that are there illegally.
Mr. Dmytro, there was information in the media that after the drone attacks, Russia temporarily blocked the sea routes leading to the Sea of Azov. What exactly does this refer to, and how much does it complicate their own logistics? Russia's export shipments?
Well, apparently yes. Navigation is currently suspended, and that's quite a significant outcome. Considering that, in fact, from the Sea of Azov, they were exporting either their own products from Taman or those they exported from our territory, that is, looted goods through Taman in particular. For us, of course, this is also a significant achievement because it prevents the Russians from using our ports on the Azov Sea for their own interests, Miryuk, Polyborodyansk.
Mr. Dmytro, does this blockade of sea routes affect the supply of the occupying forces, both in Crimea and in the south of Ukraine?
We will be able to see this in time because such processes have a lot of inertia. Yes, it should have an impact because it is simply one of the logistical supply routes. And considering that they resorted to such actions, it means that this, accordingly, must also have an effect. And
how difficult is it in general to strike targets specifically in the Sea of Azov?
In order to get there, you have to cross quite a large area of land that is covered by enemy air defense forces of the enemy. Therefore, just to reach that area, you already have to go through a rather challenging quest. And then you still have to find a moving target in a vast area, which really requires a high level of skill.
Mr. Dmytro, are the Russians now forced to change the routes of their tankers and auxiliary vessels after this series of successful Ukrainian strikes? So what is generally happening at sea with their ships and with these vessels?
As I mentioned earlier, there aren't actually that many routes there. So, of course, they are certainly welcome to give it a try. But the unique and complex physical nature of this specific body of water is distinctly different. So it is actually exceptionally challenging to navigate there.
We also see that not only warships and tankers are coming under attack, but also tugs, barges, bulk carriers, and other auxiliary vessels. Please tell us about these targets. And why have they also become a priority for Ukraine's defense forces now?
Because anything that delivers anything to Crimea basically falls under the category of logistical support. The Russians used barges constantly, both for transporting military cargo, equipment, as well as personnel. They deliberately mix with civilians to make operations as difficult as possible. As for subcargo, that's a whole separate story. You can't really control what exactly they're bringing into Crimea, considering the delivery issues. So there aren't many options here either. Could be weapons or anything else being brought in. So here, in principle, the choice of targets is quite logical. Supply ships, provisioning vessels, all of this is also about carrying out these logistical operations. And accordingly, they also fall into this same category.
Mr. Dmytro, you already mentioned the so-called Crimean Bridge, the Kerch Bridge, in our conversation. So what is actually happening there right now? How are the Russians trying to protect it? Essentially, for them, it is a transport artery, their symbol there. So actually, what
is happening there now? Well, it is like a traditional linchpin for them, maximally sacralized. So in principle, they've already done everything they could. I don't know what else they could add to ensure the security of this facility. Something tells me that even so, it won't help, but nevertheless, yes. They have always taken this issue quite seriously, and most likely that's one of the reasons why it still stands there. In addition to the previous question, I can add that crossing the state border is a crime, an illegal crossing. Similarly, entering the waters of a closed area, which is 12 nautical miles from the coast, is also an illegal crossing of the state border. In other words, it is essentially an intrusion. And here, in fact, it doesn't really matter which object is doing this, if it is doing so without permission. Therefore, all of them are, in fact, considered as such. They are analogous to hostile targets.
Mr. Dmytro, you recently said that in July, the second part of the International Sea Breeze exercises will take place. Please tell us, have these exercises already begun, and what is their main purpose and objective?
Yes, today we are officially launching the opening of the Sea Breeze exercises in the United Kingdom of Great Britain. The preparatory phase is already underway, and today we are officially starting the activities directly related to the training exercises. These exercises are traditional and are the largest international exercises for Ukraine. This year, 5 Ukrainian mine countermeasure vessels are already participating in them. The primary and central objective of our mission remains entirely unchanged. We are focused on comprehensive mine countermeasure operations and strategic staff training. we continue to diligently conduct both rigorous NATO interoperability assessments of our crews, and accordingly, we are making extensive preparations for a full-scale, large-scale demining operation in the Black Sea, which will most definitely and certainly take place in the near future.
Mr. Dimitro, can you tell us how many other countries are participating in these exercises?
In total, about 20 countries. A portion of these individuals may be active and direct participants, while others may be merely observers or perhaps serving as staff officers, but that is the total comprehensive figure we are looking at.
And how long will these exercises actually last?
They are quite short. At the very least, we will be conducting them for the next 2 weeks. The exercises will take place in the waters. I almost said the Black Sea. That's
For the future, right? That's
for the future, yes. They are being held in the Atlantic. And this year it will be quite interesting here.
Is this a one-time experiment that will remain an interesting episode in the chronicle of the war? Or is it truly the beginning of a new tactic that we will see on other sections of the coastline in the coming months? And are you even ready to trust a machine rather than a human to carry out a combat mission? Write in the comments what you think about what you've heard. If you found the video useful, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. See you in the next episode.